Medina Coach is a homie, though. It's a cool guy. 9 minutes. All right. Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Whenever you are.
Yeah. Liz, I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Do we like start the timers like at the same time?
I think so.
I wanna
I'll
time
start when
myself
you
too,
start
yeah.
speaking.
Okay. The schism began before the kidnapping. The schism began with a couple of wrinkly white hands shaking in agreement and pointing across the sea.
Diplomacy now operates through logistical control, where the logics of biopolitics is utilized on a global scale. The determination that some lives and ways of living should be prioritized over others. Diplomacy interweaves personal relationships with the state as a way to link our subjectivities with nation-building projects. Constantinople and Opus 16. Integration of forms of governance into diplomacy with more private information politics, conduction of biopolitics, global biopolitics, because legal legitimation, enactment, and interruption of neoliberal ideology, conservative regulatory mechanism, government statistical estimates, risk assessment, seek to intervene in society at a general level by normalizing knowledge about living and what it means to be a developed government subject to the process of optimizing a state of good. Government has established networks across territorial boundaries and population. Global governance disseminating transnational knowledge over ways of life and living. New forms of governmental regime seek to understand the make war, defensive promotion, and entire species, as opposed to war and a service of limited interest. Violence is a part of the economy of violence, which violence is calculated in management today. Even the most popular forms of engagement in public diplomacy to influence population with regard to scientific knowledge and increasing acceptability of programs and agents. Whereas in early post-colonial level, those who live in that underdevelopment in the late political era, the merging of development and security, where some people additionally dangerous by associated with terrorism, agents of global governance negotiators, develop with certain forces of a neoliberal regime and attempting to negotiate peace with operation that state of capacity sufficient levy to also to deal with empirical facts of government make it different after this state to occupy within a some rationality whereby local post-colonial subject utilized diplomatic to renegotiate subjectivity independence over recovered partial lost power, covering temporary spaces of autonomy, highlighting dynamics and fluid relationship that exceed the art of government, points to the art of diplomacy.
In that moment began the us and the it. The ivory tower no longer had an extensive list of requirements. The only requirement was in its name.
States and treaties are fluid and produce our investment in them. Governance is not static, but a fluid assemblage that relies on a cooperation to perpetuate it. International treaties and defense pacts are merely a reflection of our connection with it. This analysis of governance is a prerequisite to political action, as only understanding our interweaving relationship with the states and treaties is capable of mobilizing against it. Mueller 15. It questions naturalization, hegemonic assemblages, and renders them open to political challenges, and the present contingency assemblies thinking opens up avenues for alternative orderings, and thus political actions. Power arises through the making of unique connections across space, mapping the establishment and exercise of power through the establishment and alliances joined together, or whether this is techno-political mechanisms of making connections and implementing neoliberal plan and constitution of international networks of governments, several entities come together to bring something unified for a stable, unified act to the pipeline, associating a different kind of social patterns, making it almost impossible to regulate a government. The other texts behind by people crossing the U.S. border depends on tangled and making a market as conference on international treaties are themselves a product of multiple practices. The view of becoming more and more relevant with the emerging technologies that mediate long marching lines of governance and the national, local, or more or less of dense connections of the local interaction in the sense that we connect with the each other. The global is no longer out there, instead made right here wherever we live.
The spoken and unspoken agreements forged in ink and to the winds, written on paper and on the backs of those who used to be kings and queens. The greatest treatise ever written was never just codified onto paper, but it was codified into life, flesh, hair, faces, and death.
The logistics by which nations and commodities are controlled have their root in the technology of chattel slavery. The assembly line takes its roots in the cotton field, whereby the condition for mankind comes about through the endless drive towards self-determined independence. Logistics serves as a means of individuation, of codifying our relationship to ourselves in the state which destroys the possibility for living otherwise. Harney 18. Logistics delivers human's energy enemy to the point of production. The entrepreneur, the slave trader, the investor, this kind of man requires the rise of the logistics to mobilize resources to allow this false claim of independence to appear plausible. When part I speak of practicality, we're taking out an undercommon materialism that having already been denied already checks the end of the spooky means the fugitive call in response to the face of logistics degradation to produce maintenance and improvement requires a one will to dominate the full realization of logistical capitalism and modern management first developed and tested through the management of slavery camps developed in response to the demand for cotton so the forced lines of pickers that followed each other down the long roads of cotton planting. Individual slaves now responsible for an ever-cutting weight of cotton and individual productivity becoming a means of measuring and improving the entire line and linking each body to measures. The logistics of the management of production has become one relied on land and the people to attack continuously for the reasons of the proliferation of the modern target of logisticality reject the idea of individuation across the globe.
Across the treacherous seas were these bodies carried, reduced to nothing but numbers and insurance money, another tool in the armory. And now here reside the children of the sun and the stars, thousands of miles away from the heart of the world.
This capitulates an omnicide. Logistics is a self-fulfilling prophecy whose eternal growth and mastery over the world renders everything productive, making impoverishment the condition for improvement. All violence becomes justified, ensuring environmental destruction, global war, and genocide. Moten and Harney 17. It is only the European who is both master as the simultaneously being master and being slave. The simultaneous static homicidal decline, which means sustained speciation. All the speciation is the beginning of the diabolical or destructive improvement comes by means of an inefficient land and tenure where individual ownership is given perpetual. It to be rendered productive, land must be violently reduced to its productivity, which is the regulatory diminishment and management of earthly generativity. Man imposes speciation upon himself in order to confirm his supposed domination over its species. Humans are endlessly improved through the endless work to becoming man in English, making it more productive means a man eliminating biodiversity and isolated breeding and barley rye pigs, so the monocultural productivity smothers anagoxerly generativity to make policies to impose speciation upon everybody and everything, to inflict impoverishment in the name of improvement, to invoke the universal law of the oppressor to man.
What more is there to this life? Metal chains have been broken, only to be replaced by ones written in parchment. Powerful nations crushed in the hands of exploitation. Possibilities of a better future for all gone with the wind of white fear. What more is there to this life? Our light gleams in our words, our song, our hums, and our rhythms.
The one AC initiates an encounter with the other through poetry that nomadizes thought and creolizes nomadology. Our poem offers a chiastic reversibility between the self and the other, whereby we is the other. The opacity and fluidity of our engagement opens up space for possibility for subjectivity that resists interpolation and subjectification of colonial sovereignty. Drabinsky 19. There is between Glenn and Levinas a common theory, which is irreducible difference outside a logical comparison to measure without generates an anarchical representation with the self. The right epistemological effect leads to consequence of knowledge and comprehension, the grasping and possession of the other characteristic question. Models of knowing is not necessarily become the other, not to make him in the image of resist for interpretation. There's always irreducibly separation, and distance is further on the self. Other relation is a moment of creativity and opacity, the creolization not only a counter, but also an original dimension, allowing the person to be there and elsewhere, rooted and open, and countering the other overstimulates the poetic imaginary. Overstimulation creates the conditions for nomadic movement. Opacity exceeds and initiates the imaginary in order to reinscribe the work of understanding. The poetic understanding replaces discovery, diversity, standards of curiosity, but the structure, meaning, subjectivity, whatever the opacity is, always intimacy with the other is strange, productive, and another imaginary. The subject is rise of chaotic structures are reversible. The lines of movement are also reversibility. Chasm could be said in search of the other within the motion exhaustible. Gathers. I have passed on the measure of the measure. I've made a chasm. The chasm of nomadic movement always moves away into them, and rather than the idea of word opacity. This is where the nomad and the chasm are crucial. The subject is the engagement of the novice. Subjectivity is at the moment of poetics, and we speak of the relation. We no longer speak to add relation between what and what. The relation forms simply what is related and the related. You can mark the card there. And military and slavery and colonialism can be traced back to the antisocial contract. The antisocial contract produces the European neoliberal subject through an agreement to subjugate and destroy those who refuse to be party to the contract. The subjugation is undertaken in the name of progress and culminates in the constitution of a global corpse politic. Moten and Harney 17. The moment you say it is mine, you work toward it, you start a war, and the antisocial contract. But the antisocial contract emerges as a way to explain and justify the violence of the European man. Individuals must reform in order to enter the contract. Properties can be accumulated, including race, religion, gender, class, and standing trust. They can also be used to improve where it is improved, though, and it's set motion into further accumulation in nature. The social contract is inscribed on the flesh of those who cannot be refused to be dedicated to killing each other in war, carried out in the name of improvement in the main and the public of its problems. Every time continent must produce an improvement. The contract is produced by a political theorist, and a contract among people who help improve the way the paradigm is essentially destructive. A change amongst Africans who would rather move elsewhere than move in conflict wars, but the improvement of the European race. It is carried the ultra-violent European racialization different to reduce Europe and the globe around the deadly body politic, the expanding universe. Ownership of constitution was not limited to free individuals. That is the European socialist contractual form that is a required broad spectrum of material ground, exclusive exclusionary network. Exchange, on the other hand, is a practice that prevents accumulation at the set, imposing level exchange at the difference to the table in social life about social optimum. What we see ready for the experience just beyond law and measured against the measurelessness, the social optimum, the preservation and friendship, the socio-ontological totality.
Our life exists beyond the horizon of white eyes, viewing us as stepping stones for wicked agendas behind the mask of virtue. Life is beyond our use as fine print in agreements. We have the power to forge our own agreements, write our own chapters, and sign our own treaties. Let us not abide by the code of colonizers, but embrace our own meaning. With these words, we open the door to our new sunrise.
That's time.
Yep.
My timer didn't go off, but it was the cool timer. All right, I am down when you are. You're muted.
Yep. Wait, you're good, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Do current U.S. defense commitments to Japan, South Korea, NATO, and the Philippines exist post the 1AC?
We would say that the kind of role of the affirmative and the way that we think about defense treaties kind of reorients the way that we think about our alliance to, say, the government, debate, etc. So it's a question of how our poetry reorients our relationship and how that forms our subjectivities.
So they don't.
Well, we don't think it's a simple question of yes or no. We're challenging the assumption that is made when you talk about, say, what that alliance even looks like. That we're saying that the alliance goes beyond necessarily a sort of like literal kind of manuscript or words that say we will defend you, but rather the anti-social contract that is rooted in colonialism. And
wait, I'm confused. So is the anti-social contract also a literal agreement between the U.S. and other nation states?
We don't think it's like explicitly written down, but we also think it doesn't need to be in order for it to serve as a treaty that exists, i.e. the way in which, as per our Moten and Harney evidence, the way it indicates, talking about how the relationship of kind of logistical capitalism and the way in which it's opposed is one that focuses on individuation.
All right, that makes sense. I'm kind of confused. Does sort of the word logistics just refer to the process of capitalist production generally? Does it just refer to like globalization, or does it refer to?
So when Harney talks about logistics, he kind of talks about a sort of management strategy that seeks to render various or functionally all aspects of existence productive. So he says that this is rooted in the technics of chattel slavery, i.e. the way in which slaves were meant to be made productive, and by extension, land itself was made to be production for the creation of, say, monocultures, etc. And that this kind of bleeds into broader political strategies. So an analysis of logistical capitalism is just is sort of different from just an analysis of capitalism, because it starts from the understanding that logistics itself is what structures capitalism.
So logistics is a technology of capitalism. It's not the same as the economic system.
Logistics is rooted in the logics of chattel slavery that has now morphed into and supplies capitalism, but there is a difference, i.e. there are certain anti-capitalist projects which still fall in line into the context of logistics. I guess a decent example could be the way in which the Japanese Red Army embraced eugenics as a way to make human beings more productive. Even if it is an anti-capitalist tactic, it's still rooted in the logistical drive to render all life productive.
So logistics is a technology. It's not sort of a system of power unto itself.
Oops. What do you perceive the difference of those things to be, so that I can properly answer the question?
Sure. Are all nation states bad?
Yeah, we'd say that the drive to create governance in nation states is a kind of, as per our Moten and Harney evidence, a way in which governance inherently tries to speciate between what is and what isn't. So yeah, nation states kind of suck.
All right, I am sending it. It should be sent now. Let me know when everyone is good and has it up.
How many off is it?
It is 3 off, and then the case.
I'll just move my laptop a bit. Yeah, I'm good.
All right, Stefan, you all good?
Good.
Yep, I'm good.
All right, awesome.
So let me set a timer. But yeah, you're good.
All right, awesome. First off, his framework interpretation of violation in order to win the belt, the AF must at least defend hypothetical implementation of a topical plan. They don't resolve his legislative army officer school in 05 to call and introduce a formal resolution after the word resolved in USFG as a federal government after the United States in the base of DC as dictionary government politics in 98 US federal government based in DC, and the resolution calls for debate over hypothetical government action. Erickson 3 each topic contains an agent, the US, the verb should introduces action, should means to put a policy through governmental means, and the correlates of war defines defense practice, meaning if someone is attacked, we must respond. This card is quoted in Keller's political science papers from his use for that's correlates of war. And 13, the courts of war formal alliance data seeks to identify formal alliances. Defense pact is the highest level of military commitment, requiring alliance members to come to each other's aid militarily if attacked by a third party. Vote negative. The app destroys competitive argumentation because they don't produce alliance commitments. First, predictable limits. There's virtually infinite critical scholarship to draw from, and writing one is easily be mixed and matched in any way. That destroys the ability for the negative to predict and compare effectively. Second is ground. Actors, mechanism, and core policy controversies generate in-depth debates across a whole year. The alternative is generic and concessionary ground that produces superficial debates because they have very little competitive incentive to choose academically marginal research with very little literature controversy. The impact is procedural fairness. Debate is a competitive game which loses meaning without constraints, ensuring fair play. Reciprocity is essential to competition because debaters rely on their opponents to collectively pursue excellence and bring out the best in each other. Voting for plans to have degrees activity across the board. And debate has no effect on politics or individual arguments have no effect on who we are as people, which means the ballot will never solve any of their offense. However, nuanced research and clash with a well-prepared opponent internally turns their case by improving advocacy. They turn debate into a monologue, which means their arguments are presumptively false until subjected to well-researched scrutiny. Next up is the dissent. Japan alliance is high now as Komas and Kalamasama in 19 as presidency on full. Trump has switched away from the campaign threats in favor of a good diplomatic relationship with the Koreans and Japanese. This is part of the clear lines of the Trump narrative. Trump has improved a stronger military and diplomatic measures towards anxiety and gradually dissolved. Trump reaffirmed a long-standing security alliance with Japan. Albany was further relieved by Trump's top policies directed into coaching. The U.S. and Japan have shared the same view. Trump's strong seem to go hand-in-hand with obvious attempt to reconsider formulating a strong Japanese role in regional security. Obama and Trump strategies have remained more or less similarly held around the same hope as most fundamental alliances. And strong U.S. Japan alliance prevents a range of existential threats. As time right in 16 U.S.-Japan alliance, we will need all of its strength. Its international environment will be challenging and uncertain. In addition to China and Russia, Japan, the Middle East is unstable. Global challenges such as terrorism, prolific climate require action. North include the freedom of internet. U.S. Japan will shape the environment by encouraging responsible behavior and opposing concepts destabilizing to preserve a world order. The world is witnessing a momentous change. China, Russia, and ISIL are simultaneously threats that international order, territorial disputes, and nuclear proliferation present serious risks. Pockets of uncertainty could threaten stability, climate, and eco-degradation threaten the ability to cooperate in the face of transnational challenges will have important implications. Next up is the critique. Politics of affect, difference, and desire preclude a class-based analysis. Class itself becomes dispersed amongst a series of interpersonal relationships. Under their framework, the social is created by affect by making it possible to enact change as Emperor and Sarah Dowside 8. The freedom is no longer thought depending on the existing social relationship. Production freedom is obtained by working with the system of wage equal. Its difference in heterogeneity, which replaces resistance to class capitalism, class homogeneity. The descriptive differences dispense economic assets of the social and rewrites the class in terms of the post-class belonging. A link of affinity that affects suffering and hope classes to grow and rewritten through flows of affect. The crisis of modernist class politics, the crisis of desire affects are seen as shaping into the materials, but the class are not recognized as conditioning affects. Affects are considered autonomous and elemental. Misplaced they call for seducing, cajoling, enrolling, enticing, inviting, escapist, hereditary power of the leftist pleasure activism. Translation of class from objective fact into the subjective pains and joys until the tiny intensity of the affects around the differs from those emotions attributed to the prototype to deploy hope and daily enjoyment to reconcile workers' existing conditions, exploitative, and teach them in less than a joyful fatalism. To replacing class with an affect has become a routine interpretive transference, which is corporeal, is naturalized against the conceptual end. Thus, the locus of energy for liberating the subject of visceral taking place at the collectivity in class. The social is no longer seen as the affects, but now thought through the socials made by affective alienation is converted from the material into an affect that brought some depression. Poetics of affects and emotions displaced to class struggle in the northward. Change is no longer perceived by the affects of changing structure, but by the change of affects and desire. The affective in the left economics is turned into a logic of irretrievable labor to displace material labor. The class is unrepresented and desire and difference. Class struggle is supplanted by ethical self-transformation, and racialized capitalism requires the very environmental exploitation and structural violences that undermine its own stability. Collapse will come in 2015, cause extinction, absent radical recalibration. The street in 16 capitalism has always been permanently unstable. Capitalism promises infinite growth and infinite worldly. The fact that capitalism has managed to outlive all its predictions and impending death need not mean it will be forever able to do so. The structural crisis is much bigger than the Great Recession. While we're seeing locus capitalism at the bottom of the contracted teeth, cycle with no upturn, resource shortages, pacification, and workers' decline of U.S.-centered world order combined the global disorder to make restoration of the capitalist system more impossible. The capitalism would only perish as world destruction of civilization, nuclear war, climate change, the technological displacement of labor will finish capitalism by the mid-century. The war ecological question may accelerate the crisis. New sectors of the expansion of markets, the growth of finance, government, employment, and education, all five escapes close, and such will tap to capitalism's traditional economic theories that have lost so much predictive power. The different disorder coexist and reinforce one another. Frailties because simultaneously the Cuba remedies have been exhausted. The capitalism, the accumulation of deficits may be seen as an endogenous dynamic self-destruction. When it comes down to capitalism, is entropy, a system of breakdown of system integration, and the alternative is Maoism. We endorse a communist political party based on the vanguard that preaches the dialectic. Every description is inherently prescriptive, so revealing the ultimate truth of dialectical materialism. We shout knife in hand, it is right to rebel against reactionaries. The science of social formation must reflect the revolutionary movement, less to be lost in mere theory. Another, the capitalists convert or kill the bourgeoisie. The reason and history are on our side, and the only reason to struggle against the false idea that comprador, capitalists, and petty bourgeoisie pigs is that we can overcome capitalist domination. But do any is right to rebel against reactionaries. Every knowledge is orientation, every scripture is prescription. Marxism is what rebellion demands. That one consider it right. The science of social formation bear no interest in the masses, so unless it reflects the revolutionary movement, Marxism must be accumulated with some other popular revolution detailing the target Mao sentence specifically. situates rebellion as originary in the part places the correct ideas from reactionary social destruction legitimated by theory. Mouth situates Marxist theory trusted within the unity of theory and practice. Rebels persist knowledge of their duty to annihilate reactionaries. Marx is not conciliatory as a dictatorship, and if it needs to be tyranny, knowledge in the dialectical practice of theory may expose reactionary illusion entertained by those who serve and practice. Whoever is not within the revolutionary movement knows nothing. The systemization of practical revolutionary speeches with one advanced without experiences without practice. There's no knowledge, there's no testing ground in the case of the theory that only refers to idealist absurdity. The sentence summarizes Marxist class position as a revolutionary sickness an all-out outbreak, which withstands anyone who tries to consider Marxism not from the standpoint of rebellion. One who rebels against reactionaries. In fact, the rebellion is reducing rebellion to subject Marxism, the recapitulation of the wisdom of rebellion. One only by the Mao's enterprise rebels of proletarians could do and will allow us to know through their rebellion. Not only thus can we say yes, contradicting its antagonists. Yes, the workers' rebellion is the very recent right of the history. The proletarians are right, and they have their reasons right. Their reasons on their side. The rebellion is the objective contradiction that pits the workers against the bourgeoisie. The Marxist reason is the affirmation of being liberal in itself cannot be strengthened by consciousness of its own reason. Rebellion is sure victorious region. It speaks of class struggle, the primacy of communism, the dictatorship of proletariat. Ideas emerge from the struggle against false ideas. Reason is forged against reactionary absurdities. For truth affirms itself in the retrospection of nonsense. It is the question I continue in the dialect, which means to give reason to the mouth against the revisionists. Next, the AF. Descriptive academic speeches aren't a reason to vote AF. The second 16 speeches by academics are not action. For those who are talking as a profession, action can be very difficult. The purpose of the distinction is to clear way for the appreciation of difficulty, uncertainty, and perplexity of real-life political activism. However, requires dedicated, organized action over time. Those who do not have official political power, words alone do not have the power to change the world. People who do things in the world they hope to change through, though they may not have a strong possibility of getting results. The activists should say whatever they want for their own sake, but not discourse. It is not what should be done, has a link to reality. And the AF is in for politics and can place the expression of black positionality with the development of political projects and theologically presumes that liberation rises from the embrace of pathology. This depoliticizes resistance and short circuits the development of sustainable political mobilization. That's read in 16. Those who understand academic to be political mobilization and themselves politics that understand needs think strategically. The is not concerned with a broad political base and other properly the movements follow the trajectory from an expression within ideological tools form dominate ideology from revolutionaries. And for politics is understood as political acts of everyday resistance and movements emerge within quotidian resistance. For politics resonated with group essentialism underlying hidden transfers and supporting a population. These rate the evolution of movements theologically don't pursue conditions typically lead to the action. They don't. And even if they are 100% right about their descriptions of power, only our model of state engagement allows for debaters to research it. The constitution within rhizomatic organization come to conclusions about how to act to check that violence. Absent it collapses. It's UN 6. The aim of system science is to deal with the complexity in the real world. Field systems have proposed to focus on problem solving. We need to shift the problematization. Management organization is concerned with rational decision making by thinking about consequences and choosing course of action in a certain situation involving complexity. Is the nature of rhizomatic organization constituted by desire. No decision making process can be understood without considering complex aspects of the goal. Systematic inquiry is not to come to definite solutions or answers, but to increase problem solvers, understanding through participatory resources to increase our capacity to find possibilities through problematization. Power represents politics of organizations and pure affirmation of difference and or becoming is violent, only situating concepts of power within context of organization able to produce positive outcomes. I'll read blue nail. And 13, affirming difference puts a danger affirmation as we ultimately ambivalent reproduce complicity. Affirming potentiality is confirmed ideological radicality that changes over its opposite remains radically insufficient, showing that nature of politics provides no more contribution to politics than it does potentiality. A desire intervention cannot merely show in the antagonist of political organization necessary to make a process lose, does not offer political organization that would bring to multiplicities into specific political interventions. Deleuze's concept of thought is aristocratic individuals are not equally capable. It is potential for change to be a hierarchy. Political deterioration is indifferent to actual politics. Valorizing pure potentiality is affirming little more than utopian destruction without subjecting how do agents deliberate between different political decisions. The subject is simply replaced by affirmation of the ambivalent nothing to contribute to in collective decision making. And we can't just abandon humanism if civil society still exists. Humanism is not only redeemable, but ceding control of it to the colonizer is super unethical. That's why Wilder 16. I should just make that an analytic.
Cool. Starting the timer. Ready?
Yep.
What is an engagement with the state? Like, what does that mean?
I mean, it takes place in a couple different ways. Our U evidence, as well as our Zach and Nail evidence, Reed evidence, identify it as understanding that kind of problematizing the ways in which blackness, logistics, and racialized capitalism kind of situated those things is not sufficient, but rather
like
we have
an example. Like would say like police violence. Like if somebody were to be beat by a cop, would that be an engagement with the state?
Not in the sense that we're defending. We think state engagement requires working through those institutions to reduce those material actions of violence, so like, even though that is an interaction with the state.
How does one get into these institutions or whatever in order to engage with the state? Like, I'm just not understanding what is and isn't an
There's a bunch of
engagement with the
ways.
state.
So, like, one is like we are always already engaged in local politics by shaping our communities and kind of the different like practices and policies that kind of define resource distribution. What is proper behavior, not proper behavior, et cetera, et cetera. You can get into them a couple different ways. You can do things like simply voting. You can go to things and do lobbying of your local congressional districts. They're open to any of the public to lobby different bills.
All right.
You can do things like getting engaged within mutual aid funds and like using those to create bigger lobbying groups for national groups. You can sign petitions.
How does the AF foreclose opportunities for these things? Or like how does the AF foreclose this?
So the Reed and the Zach evidence make a couple of claims. One is the focus on affect as being praxis or political engagement is kind of downplays the actual like organization and kind of time and energy it takes to be an effective political challenge. And two is the idea that kind of we can just kind of reimagine or reinterpret kind of how these trees operate through poetics, and that somehow creates a blockage into the node of logistics, undermines the energy or kind of willingness for individuals to participate in things like everyday resistance or political engagement.
On to the K. So as per sort of like Marxist theory goes in Maoism, how would the working class go about abolishing itself and being capable of like being more than just a product of capitalism?
I mean, you clearly don't know enough about Mao if you think it's just like the working class gives it up, right? Like there's a reason why the landlord genocide happened in the first place. Maoist ideology is different from Marxist ideology because it's not just focused on re-education. Rather, it's focused about creating a centralized planned economy that eradicates class difference. So Maoist interpretations did a couple things. One, any landlords or elites who were not willing to give up their resources to be redistributed through the state were killed or imprisoned. And two, the rest of the population was kind of re-educated in these ideas of communitarian ethics first, which was easier in China than it would be globally, of course, obviously because of like Taoist teachings about family loyalty. But our argument is that that model can be globalized.
Okay. Lise, would you like to take prep?
I'm good for prep. I just want to know if I should send like the whole document or just the cards that I'm gonna read.
Whatever you feel most comfortable with.
I think I'm just gonna send the full thing. So let me just download that really quickly.
I'm just gonna go get a quick bite to eat. I apologize. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay, take your time. While he's grabbing food, I'm gonna run to the restroom really quick. BRB.
Okay, no worries. I'm just gonna send it to you right now.
Yeah, I'll be back in a sec too.
I'm good when y'all are. Well, everyone's on mute. Did I miss something?
No, they'll just be back in a sec. Kayla want to use the bathroom, and Stefan will be back really quickly.
Okay, that's true. So it's just us.
You've got this word, please.
I feel like I'm saying it wrong. I apologize.
That's alright.
One of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, I've been saying this wrong the whole time. Terrible person.
No.
I will say, there's nothing more of a power move than I like your name. Thanks, I chose it myself. Like, baller.
Yeah, I love telling people that. I'm trying to make it like the right document. It's taking a bit. Damn, I think I'm gonna have to Yeah, I was having an issue with like Harrison earlier. How like my documents weren't like showing up for me to like send them. So I think I have to like put it into another doc, which is a lot of work. So I'm sorry if this takes forever.
It's all good. We also just lost Stefan, so.
Oh yeah, he said he'll be back in a minute.
Oh, Stefan, are you back?
You're muted if you're talking.
Okay, I finally got it. There you go.
Stefan, the 2AC has not started yet. I have it up, so I'm good when everyone else is.
Okay, cool. Let me just get my timer. Okay, anyone not ready?
What's the order?
We're good. Oh yeah. Case, alliances, framework, then K. All right, we
Good when
good?
you are.
Awesome.
I believe so.
Starting. Cool. Starting. Oh yeah, there's an overview at the top of the case. Starting now. The conversation has shifted. We are no longer abiding by the language of the empire, but rather our own language. We are defining our existence and refusing the codification of ourselves into nothing but populations needing to be tamed. Don't you know what this resolution is dictating? Forcing us to speak about the parchment chains they've created, making us submit to their governments that only works to silence and destroy. Their process of accumulation brings it to a place where the Caribbean is a cash crop and a vacation spot, Southeast Asia is a military base, Africa an endless harvesting ground for blood diamonds, and the Middle East a hotspot for black gold. What is life beyond the gaze of the white neoliberal subject? What is life outside of the realm of the benign colonization and destruction? The researcher debated when that force of marginalized voices continue to operate and analyze the world through the lens of the American empire totalizes our omnicide. Our importance becomes based on how well we fit into the interpretation of what language is and what it should look like, rather than our own subjectivities and understanding what these words and actions mean. Our poetry is the means of destruction of this model. We model and disrupt the normative reading of cards, and instead of forcing everyone to actually flow the damn poem, our poetry refuses to be constrained to the idea that one must be deemed productive in order to be valid. Our methodology is not just a criticism of the content of debate and the way we are forced to defend violent institutions that perpetuate our style of decline, but it's also the form in which we engage in these concepts and structures. Our investment in these structures is what allows them to function, just like our investment in these trees and defense facts and the social contract that gave way to this model of owning what you improve was never meant to include black folks, but we are part of it because of the illusion that these structures can save us and that this humanitarian colonization can help us become valid in the white neoliberal periphery. This is the exact process that unfolds when we are forced to prove our value in relation to the words of the resolution. Only refusal and disruption of this process can allow us to imagine a world beyond that has been codified decoded by the language of the colonization. Only affirming our interpretation and normalization can create spheres of discussion to happen. Our use of poetry recenters the discussion about militarism and colonialism around the populations that are moved around and reduced to nothing but numbers and logistics. They're in recentering these discussions that we can then move away from the erroneous idea that language is objective and truly conceptualize what certain words mean in the context of Black folks and other otherized populations. We reject the staticism of language that ignores structural violence against the population and even creates that becomes before any further discussion of alliances and defense, because we operate under the assumptions that deviate away from those which mystify the continued process of rendering population productive and shifting the discussion the form in which we have the conversation, the concept of the conversation. In turn, we refuse the narrative accumulation produced by colonial domination. Instead, move towards the model of exchange. Martin Hardy 17. Onto their case answers. First, there's X16 evidence is not responsive. Our performance is our method, and they should not be able to generate any type of offense over this. Turn this argument because they're actively participating in the statistization of language. Next, their infrapolitics argument is a turn. Infrapolitics is good. Debate itself is infrapolitics because our practice is the practice ground for the real world strategies about policy and how Black folks can navigate the world beyond the white neoliberal realm. We need to know how we engage, but we need to know how we engage before we actually engage. While poetry is creating these spaces, other ways to theorize our engagement and further imagine new futures for ourselves, we are having to strategic discussion about how we navigate the world coded against us. We don't need to be politicized. They're merely creating an artificial distinction between these forms of theorization, which is inherently violent. Those political strategies talk about what benefits Black folks. Wait, do those political strategies talk about what benefits Black folks without commodifying them? If not, then why are we talking about political strategy? Next, you can group the next two cards on why institutional engagement is good. A few arguments. Number one is a link turn. The political is poetic. Understanding the way that we relate to each other and how it is informed by internalized notions of productivity is a form of political engagement that creates a space to reformulate the entire possibilities of we can do and how we can do it. This only means that the advocate can destroy political cynicism that leads the way of people from political engagement to their conception of institutions is wrong. Muller indicates that totalizing institutions or assemblage of local interactions can be intervened. Thus, the act engages with the institution of debate and capital and how it manifests here. Next, your Welder 16 is wrong because humanism is terrible. Mona Hardy indicates how humanism comes through the institutional contract as means of individuating groups in order to determine who is and isn't a proper human. A logic that justifies slavery and colonialism. The Jakar and Bevel, we aren't defending any ontological statements, but we're...
Oh, they didn't read those cards. You don't need to make those.
Oh, okay. Cool. On their got some. Wait, I don't know how to pronounce this.
They didn't read that. You can move on to Japan.
Okay, cool. Alliances DA. The model that they have produced by reading an alliances DA is net bad, and the impact turned by the act. The impact holds no alliance. Wait, the topic holds no alliance to Black folks, and in the broader sense of IR, there are no consensual alliances that exist with otherwise populations, and thus this functions as a net benefit to the app. Them reading the DA and round is exactly the statistization of language that totalizes violence against these populations. And they have turned the performance exactly. Wait. And they have in turn performed exactly that, which is by itself a reason to vote for the app. They have not only made wrongly assumed that alliance is an objective word, but with no subjective implication, but they have ignored the violence that always occurs beneath the surface of these agreements, and they're not only complicit in it, but active participants in it. Our Muller evidence also impacts their concession of how alliance is formed between the U.S. and Japan. It is not totalizing contract between two sovereign nations, but rather a series of interconnecting relationships that at each point is a local and malleable to our subjective relationship. This means that as poetry is critical to breaking down these connections and best allowing our relations to work, we're supercharging all of our education arguments and frameworks as well as being indeed to the interpretation because they can never access to it. Framework. Top line framework is debate's meaning of staticizing language is a way to destroy possibility for deviant forms of knowledge and performance within debate is a part of a broader strategy to logistical capitalism to codify all things of specific meaning as a control is reproductive kind of interpretation. Teams should be able to defend creative and subjective interpretation of the app. These interpretations allow individuals to interpret their resolution through different subjectivity and thus increase participation for folks who've been marginalized groups and opens up discussions about the different ways to rapidly stand and affected by U.S. imperialism and logistical capitalism in turn to any education impact because the counter-interpretation allows us to produce different forms of knowledge beyond the intelligibility of the white system, able-bodied male gaze. And creative interpretations are also good for KVK debates because a lot of debates teams talk about various forms of theory and methodology without being bound to participate in inherently exclusionary conversation of lawmaking and roving against policymakers and codifying these things into normative intelligibility. Two DAs to their interp. The wet-ass P-word DA. They're focused on the form of debate over the context used to create advocates that use the language of knowledge to use to shut down marginalized groups and how they debate. Instead of what is debate about their model debate, Collins said, Ben Shapiro talking past the saying that the mastery of individual is used as justification of warfare like horror over Hillary Clinton's skills gained from turning education or skills and that the net could possibly provide. This is also showing how people like Ben Shapiro works of art made by Black women like Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B swap to abide by their definition of what is discourse and what is valuable in music and art. This is inherently violent to Black people and Black debaters in particular because they get to mix characterize these performance and try to render them productive in the white male gaze. On the side DA, their imposition of a static unifying definition of the resolution which all debate discussion on is rooted in the homicidal attempt to make all things measurable and predictable. Governance is the only function by rendering some ways of life and living to be rational by others to be sure to keep it in the illusion justifying imperialism, colonialism, and need to control which framework is debate's way of making debate measurable. This controls the internal link to fairness because debate is terrible and debate produces fascist debaters and arguments. Let me see. The movements operationalized simply the staticism of language perpetuates the same violence being critiqued by the app. The neg determines which acts are talkable and which are not inherently violent and results and the erasure of any possible interpretation beyond the worlds of the definitions that are possible within the periphery of the white neoliberal gaze. Grant, we still preserve grounded class. We're critiquing mastery of language over political. The net gets access to any aspect of the status quo, ordering worlds of revolutionary strategy. The gay access to structural case like CAP or Afropest, queer negativity, hedge good, or essential left electoral politics. They just need to defend instances of mastery. Fairness. Under the nice interpretation, seems to any sort of interpretation don't get to me that don't mean the static ideas of what language means. And they should. And are always excluded and deemed less valuable and thus unproductive. This turns fairness and because to actually exclude any team that wish to analyze the resolution under own subjectivities of language. Also, fairness is not an impact on this arbitrary attempt to will into being a trend to render alternate forms of knowledge productive. On to the K. After no discussion of race, the K theorizes otherizes laborers as producers for capitalism versus black folks who are the commodity of capitalism. The problem with the movement of the K is that they wouldn't be mad if they were compensated justly for their labor, because that is what their struggle boils down to. They ignore the context of shadow slavery and frame it as a discussion from class struggle, when in reality there's no labor without the slave. The NEC does not analyze it this way. Maoist groups are always fighting to seize the means of production, but when black folks become part of the discussion, it can no longer be about seizing the means of production, because that is what they are. In order to refuse and resist it first requires having a relationship to labor and production, and black folks are neither tethered to, because the slave didn't get to own the cotton that they picked. Black folks thus have to seize their agency, and that is not a movement for black people, and quite literally benefits everybody but black people. Absent a discussion about black is the transition to Maoist utopia will simply be a transition with anti-black structures where they get to blame black folks for the faults of their movement and structure of their movement. They mirror the liberal viewpoint of the 2016 election, where black people felt excluded from having to choose between two racist candidates, and white liberals immediately blamed them for the election of Trump, rather than blaming the structures and people that allow these two awful candidates to be their only choices in the first place. The K will always fail without an analysis about race, and they will always create violence and policing of who is allowed within their movement. Their vanguard methodology is bad because they're prescribing a solution to the masses as a one-size-fits-all solution. Their vanguards will inevitably exclude otherwise population because they refuse to acknowledge the role that anti-blackness and shadow slavery play in the discussion of labor. The analysis of capitalism is wrong. Starting from the standpoint of dialectics and class, obfuscates the way that capitalists produce via the afterlife of slavery and has now become a logistical capitalism. Harding indicated how the assembly line and modern capitalism comes from the regulatory mechanism that developed for shadow slavery, and through the desire of mass to render all life productive. Focus on parties and mass mobilization is not the destruction of capitalism, but a recreation of the desire to control what marks the afterlife after slavery, dooming their strategy to fail. Only an orientation towards poiesis is capable of refusing mastery over capitalism that thrives over creative subjectivity or determined by capital. Perm do poiesis. Interpreting the party through a poetic lens allows us to deconstruct both capitalism and the concept of the working class. Their understanding of revolution makes the all impossible, because O was the myth of progress. And I'm not gonna have time to read the card, so that's time.
Yeah, that can just be an analytic term.
Okay. I'm open for prospects.
Awesome. Right, timer set. Cool. My first question is, define poiesis for me.
Poiesis, if you really want to, do you want it like how we define it within the perm, or how we define it within the context of the world?
I mean, you've made the argument that the AF is a attempt at poiesis to change the terms of alliances. What does that mean?
So poiesis is the process by which meaning is made. So it's not it's essentially what the AF is saying, kind of how you just said right now. We're creating meaning through poetry. We're establishing meaning where meaning has been taken from us, essentially. Okay. So we take these words that take away our meaning and we place them back in there.
That makes sense. I want to talk about framework really quick. The what ask keyword disad. You've made the argument that Ben Shapiro talks fast and says nothing, which is the mastery of the spectacle of debate, and that's bad because he can critique art and music by black individuals. Why is that the same as saying that debate has a structure and people should follow that structure?
It's not just Ben Shapiro can talk shit about Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B, but rather that because he abides by certain quote-unquote structures of debate, and how people who Hillary Clinton and Karl Rove have gained those skills from debate, that means that they're able to make these violent interpretations of what black art is.
Yeah, so there have been bad people in debate who followed the rules and then they did anti-black stuff. Why does that mean the structure of debate is anti-black? Why is that not indicative of those people?
Of that to exist. The structure is basically what allowed them.
Let's take a step back. So Ben Shapiro, Hillary Clinton, Karl Rove, they only got their politics because they participated in debate. That's your argument.
We're not saying that that's how they got their politics. We're saying that
you made the argument that debate is what shaped their subjectivity, made them likely to do anti-black stuff. So you've made the argument that they got their politics from debate.
We
Why
think
is
for the
that
most
true?
part it's honestly like a question of skills and the way in which Ben Shapiro sort of fetishizes form over everything.
We've never made a skills argument. Why should
we're saying
concerned with that?
but we're making the argument that your model of debate produces those kind of interpretation of what debates
Why are
look like,
you
what
not
debates should
also
be.
just obsessed with form?
We're
Because-
we're literally like disrupting.
Your argument about
normal
poesis is
forms of
about
debate, like, that's the
reinterpreting
entire-
meaning through form. Why is that not an over focus on form that can reproduce bad?
It's an
poetry?
interruptive. It's basically interrupting normative form. Like our entire like act is premised on the fact that we're interrupting this in order to recenter these discussions around otherwise
That
bodies.
leads me
Not
to
that
my
we're
last
obsessed with
question.
having everything.
What does that interruption do? Is it just that interruption? The judge should vote for that, or is there something that happens after the interruption?
The interruption allows us to have discussions that aren't centered around like American imperialism, and it talks about these structures that inevitably oppress us.
That's his time.
So, Steven, the way we can do prep is we can... Oh, he just left. Never mind.
Yeah, I guess go to Discord.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I'll start. Y'all can time it. I trust you.
I started it now, assuming he's prepping.
Oh wow, no talk with the partner. He's just doing his own thing. Brutal. All right, Elise. Yeah. Cool.
Cool beans. I didn't get to all of it. Wow, I really overestimated myself there.
That happens. I mean, this is like us stress testing these blocks, so it's helpful for us to like know. Like, I knew the 1AC would probably be too long, but I didn't know where it would be too long. So,
Stefan, I assume you're still taking prep, or no?
Oh, no, I wasn't taking prep. I just picked up my stand.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
No. Yeah, Caitlin, same plan. So it is Cap,
no prep? That's cool.
Japan, and then T.
Stefan, what's your shirt?
It's
I would
the
prefer not
Zizek.
to.
I would prefer
I would
not
prefer
to.
not
Shirt.
to. I really want to get one of those. We can be matching.
Sick. Cool. Is everyone good?
Yep.
Concede the permutation, it's only a test of competition. None of the arguments that they made about Mao's and being exclusionary are a priori reasons to vote negative because they're just theory and it's not links to things that we did in Japan. There is an objective fact that Japan says is real. We read two pieces of evidence on this that were uncontested. It's unclear why acknowledging the truth that is violent or endorsing that pact specifically. Japan prolif causes extinction, which went conceded, and terminating the alliance would lead to it. But they didn't bite the link, which makes their counter-interpretation on T completely irrelevant because they clearly don't lead to the resolution, i.e. they shift the object debate away from that, which I'm going to get to now. T. In order to win the ballot, they must clearly at least defend the hypothetical implementation of a topical plan. They don't. You should vote negative. Instead of having planless FD grades that activity and debate across the board by undermining procedural fairness. This does not require the use of any particular type of evidence or style of presentation. Topicality is a minimum basis for competition. The confines of the topic still allow for alternative forms of expression like using poetry, personal narrative, critical thought. Evaluate this debate through the lens of competition. Debate is indisputably a game. This is a tournament with elimination rounds added bracket. Each round features one winner and one loser competing for trophies and speaker awards. They change their app from round to round based on strategy, which has a few implications. First is that content is determined by what wins, not individual beliefs. Competition makes it impossible for them to argue in good faith because they have a dog in the fight. For all their rhetoric, they've chosen to manipulate the topic for strategic reasons alone. Their defense are contrived. They set out with the intent to justify giving themselves an unfair advantage. Preserving procedural fairness should be your first priority. It's key to the integrity of the game. Every uncontested debate for different reasons, but the fact they should ever presented a 1AC. Two things. First is that they too rely on fair adjudication of arguments. They would be upset if you decided not to evaluate element every third argument they make, or gave us a 3 on our 2, is that even if for different reasons they are equally invested in debate and activity, you don't deserve to win if you've given yourself an unfair advantage. Reciprocity is essential to competitive games. In debate, each team is relied on their own opponents to reach high-level competition based about bringing out the best in each other. You don't get better by debating unprepared or disadvantaged opponent. Concentrates on fair play and the groundwork that allows players to collectively try practical procedural fairness outweighs on scope. The broader model of debate outweighs individual acts because we don't internalize or remember anything around clash. Internal link turns the case. Dialogue with skeptics is valuable. Allows our advocates to become more persuasive, face the best possible version of their opponent's position, workshop different tactics, choose the best one. Better advocates are more likely to achieve real goals like more UEL funding or hiring more average judges. Now, I'm going to answer the top level argument about logistics that was sort of made at the top and then again throughout the flow, and which also answers most of the omnicide dissent. So you should compare both our models of debate by evaluating the relative scope of solvency that your ballot has to solve their impact in this round. Only we have presented an explanation for the balance role in the context of the gameplay that is around the relative debatability of this interact is terminal sort of like defense to all their options that should be insufficient condition. Or you can vote negative opposition. The ballot has no ability to resolve any of their impact in any capacity. A couple of arguments here. First, that's unclear what it would do to resolve. Obviously, there are capable to many people from reading arguments that ignore contemporary etc. that they disagree or taking the floor debate on any scale beyond what they themselves second that's the most logistic. That is not radical to make. It's literally in a paper written by a bunch of politics which is a production research and that they can't act like any kind of change in political action or planning or organized effort to change this space. The judges very rarely to remember the content of any single program, let alone engage with the politics of it. Outside the activity, there are other influences out of the line that outweigh service uncurated industry effect actions such as something all and even the most generous understanding outcast is important to get the particular balance.
Wait, Stefan. Wait, can I just interrupt for a sec? Because I think do y'all hear that huge washing noise?
Yeah, you have a little bit of static in the background.
Like, I can't hear what you're saying.
Can you try just adjusting your mic down a little bit?
I'm really sorry to interrupt. I just, couldn't hear what you were saying. Oh, it just got louder, whatever you did.
If you're closer to your computer, I think it works. Yeah. Harrison, what was the last thing you heard?
It was a little iffy, like the ballot stuff about how the ballot can't resolve things.
Oh yeah.
I still can't also hear what you're saying. Is it just me? Sorry.
Oh, good.
No, I hear it too. I can barely hear his voice.
Is your computer next to a fan or something? Here, you turning that off did something. Whatever you just did with your headphones worked. It's still staticky. You did something where you pushed it in. That solved it.
I think you said so. Oh, yes, it's working now. I don't know what you did, but it's perfect.
Oh, now you're muted, though.
Oh.
Oh, now we can't hear you at all. No.
I just can't hear you.
Maybe try unplugging your headphones as your mic and just using your computer.
I think you should invest in good microphones. That'd be sick.
Still not working. Now you're completely muted. Maybe try plugging your headphones in. Is there another place you can stand in your room?
Or for me, yeah, the static's back.
Yeah, I think it's just your headphones. Let's see.
Because it was working before. Something happened.
Go to your audio mixer and try turning down the input volume on your mic. That could work because sometimes when mics are too sensitive, they just pick up too much outside noise.
Yeah, we can hear it still.
It might just be my laptop.
Yeah, it might just be your fans or something. Like, that's what it sounds like. It just sounds like air.
My laptop.
That makes sense. Is there a way to move the fan? Like, is there a way to situate your computer on your stand such the fans aren't hitting the stand?
Okay.
It's a little bit better of audio.
Could you like cover the fan with something?
You don't want to do that because that will blow up your computer.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Yeah, do not cover your fans up.
I can't do it.
Is your computer just like a very hardcore computer that is just like bulky and has a fan and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I don't know if we can troubleshoot around it. Harrison, Lise, do you have your audio as loud as it can go?
Yeah, I'll just blast it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I can
that's
do that.
really the only other solution we have outside of this.
Oh wait, it's like nice now. All is good in the world. What did you do? Oh, I just can't hear you.
Yeah, try speaking.
Okay, yeah.
Dang it.
Yeah, no, you're completely muted. It's fine. It's fine. We'll just do it with the fan, and we'll try to make out the most of it.
Yeah. Sorry for all the.
Do you have analytics typed out somehow so that we can just send it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll just do that.
Didn't you say you vowed never to write anything down on your flow again?
I wrote a bunch down, but I was
Oh.
I'm gonna upload it to this.
Cool.
Sounds good.
I'm gonna upload it to this.
And then we'll just suffer through the 2NR like this.
Yeah, and then we can just start from the top again, given your mojo got cut off midway through the speech, so we'll just like pretend like the first try of the 2NC didn't happen.
Yeah. Could you like put ice on the computer to cool it down so the fan doesn't need to do its thing?
If you want water in your motherboard.
Like a bag of ice.
Yeah, that's why a bunch of people have like nitrous cooled systems in their like desktops that they make so that they don't have to have fans. But then that way they also don't have to like worry about like coolant leaking.
These are so complicated.
Mm-hmm. Big calculators.
I think we should just go back to abacuses for everything. That was sick. Abacuses are so, or like those hand crank calculators.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Does everyone have that speech? It was sent out over Discord.
Oh, okay.
I am good to begin when everyone else is, so I'll leave that up to you all.
Ready when you are, Stefan.
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm good.
See the permutation just because the competition, all their arguments are about our theory, not anything we did, which means they're not external offense on any other page. Japan defense, Japan proliferation caused extinction, which was confused, but they didn't fight but they didn't clearly concede the link, which means that all of their counter interpretation arguments on the other page are irrelevant because they obviously do not do the resolution. There, as for the exclusion arguments, there is an objective fact that Japan says is real, which we read 2 pieces of evidence about that they did not clear, that they did not respect, that they did not respond to. It's unclear why acknowledging that is violent or why it's endorsing that pact is the pact in and of itself is violent. Key. In order to win the ballot, the app must at least defend the hypothetical interpretation of a topical plan. They don't. You should vote negative. Incentivizing players to have degrade the activity debate across the board by undermining procedural fairness, which does not require the use of any political type of evidence or style of presentation topicality as a minimum basis for competition. The confines of the topic still allow alternative forms of expression like music, poetry, personal narrative, and critical thought and value. This debate through the lens of competition debates indisputably again. This is determined with elimination rounds and bracket. Each round features one winner or one loser competing for trophies. And speaker worth, they change the round from round to round based on strategy. There are a few implications. First, content is determined by what wins not individually. Competition makes it possible for them to argue in good faith because they have a dog in the fight. Don't people for all the rhetoric. They have chosen to manipulate the topics for strategic reasons. Their defense are good tries. They set out with the intent to justify giving themselves an unfair advantage. Choosing that preserving procedural fairness should be your first priority. It's keeping the entire game ever comes to for different reasons. The fact that they showed up and presented a what he thinks proves 2 things. First, that they too rely on the fair adjudication of arguments. They would be upset if you decided not to evaluate every third argument they make or gave us a 3 or 2 is that even for different reasons they are equally vested in debate. Activity, frankly, you don't deserve to win if you've given yourself an unfair advantage. Reciprocity is essential in competitive games of debate. Each team is relying on their opponents to high-level competition debates or bringing out the best of each other. You don't get better by debating an unprepared or disadvantaged opponent. Constraints on fair play with the groundwork that allows debaters to collectively strive for excellence. Procedural fairness outweighs on scope. The broader model of debate outweighs individual actions. You don't internalize or remember any frequent round clash. Internal link turns against dialogue with skeptics is valuable. Allows advocates to become more persuasive, face the best possible route to their opponent's position. Workshop favorite tactics. Choose the best one. Better advocates are more likely to have real goals like more UDL funding or hiring more diverse judges. Now, a lot of the arguments that they made sounded very similar and were sort of articulations of the idea that restrictions on language are the same as logistical capitalism. So I'm going to answer the top level analysis and the omniscient just have by extension here. You should compare both our models made by evaluating the relative scope of solvency. Your ballot has to solve their impact in this round. Only we have presented an explanation for the ballot's role in the context of the game. Played out around the relative debatability of the app, which should act as terminal internal linking fence to all their offices to be a sufficient condition for you to vote next. On presumption, the ballot has no ability to resolve their impact in any capacity. There's a couple of arguments here. First, that is, I don't care what it would be to them to solve. Obviously, they are capable of reading people from reading arguments they disagree or changing the board debate on any scale beyond which they themselves do. Second, the vote logistics app is not radical to the big views. Literally in a paper written by a bunch of policy folks, which is a presumption level argument that they can't actualize any kind of political action planning or organized effort to change the space. Judges is very rarely even remember the content of any single opinion, let alone engage in the outside the activity. There are other influences that are important. It's unclear if the debate is able to affect macro social structures at all. Even the most generous and data how account is forced to admit the singular balance. So this is unclear on solution has any relation. The production of racial capital characteristics. So answer is more resolution to that argument. You should ask yourself why defending the resolution half the time is equivalent to endorse here, but even what impact the impact to endorse it would be none of their evidence is about debate, but rather things use origin and function exist on an entirely different social scale. 6 is that older solvency is premised on the poetry that was already wrote. They can lose and still solve with our interpretation. Doesn't prove solvency differences. Any case argument with external truth our model does it. There's independently don't weigh the case against one reason the app is good or not. Separate our whole argument how the app strategically bolsters our content by not being topical. Prioritize how interpretation affects availability. 2 is if we win our limited ground argument, you should presume the app is faulty is not been subject to well closer scrutiny. Not all advocates are good at acting on responsibilities to people. They came to represent residential powers with order and dialogue with skeptics. Proves that the PDA combined with reading the more radical version of their argument on the negative proves that the app is not mutually exclusive. With thoughtful advocacy, you can see that with almost 100% of the app, it's still vote negative because it's not incompatible with a limited topic. The counter interpretation top level, it solves none of our often creative and subjective interpretations of the resolution could lead any individual orientation towards the defense fact. All section libraries star this argument. Their interpretation lets them choose what to defend. They have a competitive incentive to choose a critical interrogation of the resolution to morally indisputable. Most martial literature with the least background, any paper about anything would become an after interpretation doesn't require you have to make a door of accuracy that just describes system. The negative nothing say their interpretation is not predictable and not grounded in the rules of the resolution, so T's won't prep for it. One, their interpretation allows the F's to cement their infinite prep advantage. Choosing descriptive value statements that can't be proved wrong. These are competitive instead of monopolized and moral high ground sides that flash wars for negative reactionary. Reductionist position 2 is that absent is consistent and stable play. There's no sufficient condition for negative victory. They can always win on the one part of the one team. We don't just 3-3. As their interpretation puts a burden of proof on the negative. The negative proves that the resolution is logically consistent. They can win as long as they provide an assumption. You can't enter the whack dissent here. This is an incredibly sloppy string of anecdotes that is not obviously related to any part of our model. We are only a singular restriction on form. We are one singular restriction on form that is not based on restricting content and sort of forms of expression. The way that this dissent talks about the stuff that they talk about is the result of sort of macro oppression. People who necessarily debate people after debate, and it's ridiculous to expect any model of debate to sort of resolve those things, but you should just know that there's no clear way in which our model debate leads to or why our model debate specifically trains people to advocate for certain things in a certain way. In theory, people can advocate for those for sort of forms of materialism, etc. under their model. Yeah, Dom is such a thing. Literally every social organization involves some judgment, ideal forms, and arguments. It's impossible to escape contestation, so you should make it as effective as possible. It's essentially culturally we allow any form of scholarship which answers their sort of argument about living out. We are sort of limiting out what we are sort of engaging in one rule that sort of maintains the metastasis of the game, which is something they also think is good, i.e. they also engage in restrictions on their conduct and languages around how sort of they follow speech types, etc. All prove that they are invested in those forms of competitive incentives. They're just getting rid of this one because it's too competitively. I'll answer also the TVA. If we win a TVA, it proves that none of their disads they could be used to justify that their justifications could be used to justify a topical plan, which means they have no offense. So their TVS at the United States federal government should reduce line commitments with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization member states. Logistical demands for access manifest themselves in NATO's energy security agenda. The emphasis on the cultivation of infrastructure and security transportation have to apply lines as the extension of capital-sized par excellence, reconstituted lines as the vanguard of the Western Schlagen. Line structure of international regional conference supporting the Russian critical energy infrastructure. Mark the card infrastructure. Now I'm going to answer that you had bad arguments. All of these first, all of their limits arguments are limits bad arguments, but not reasons why getting rid of limits unpins the game, which is all of the work I did above. Second, the ground arguments are all irrelevant. Procedural fairness is not about the negative's ability to debate. It's about the ability of the judge to effectively decide that the negative has met the burden of retortion, which you have shifts by making it unclear. It means the judge arbitrarily decides something outside of the jurisdiction, but the counter-interpretation has to set up an effective role for negative gut check. The topic committee's decision-making process revolves around neg ground, not af ground. But the ground they provide is terrible. First, it's contextual. We have to see solvency to get a link to alliance is good to. That is proved by firms in 2AC shiftiness. There's no way to know what the app will look like to our base. The YDC app is stable average 3, it's a question of models. The grounding list is unpredictable, only applies to their app, which explodes the neg research project because we have to prepare a specific strat for every app. Fairness is key to motivate the best research practices and innovation. The neg won't engage for specific strats or tasting if they know a specific task, which means that interesting 20 people will always be followed up by incredibly generic 20 hours. They said that fairness is not an impact, which was super bloody. At the bottom of the Twitter, there was also not a war for it. I did a ton of work about why fairness matters insofar as debate matters, which means that you should not allow new 1AR interpretation relations of the impact turn, because the 2NR is time press and can always be used by nuclear.
That's time.
Okay. You good for cross-ex?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Starting now. So, what does this round do to change the structure of debate?
I mean, I don't think the ballot can change the structure of debate.
No, I just mean the round happening in general. Like, what does this do to change the structure of debate?
Or like the structure of like fairness.
That the individual decision changes the structure of debate. We think that the judge voting negative has the ability to preserve fairness. Like, the only thing that the judges was. Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah. What does fairness look like?
It looks like the AF defends the resolution in some capacity, and the negative is able to negate it is able to win by negating the resolution.
So this is just for a neg ballot, or like, do you only want teams to defend the USFG so you can get a neg ballot? Because that kind of sounds like it's.
We want the negative to be able to win by saying the resolution is bad.
Okay. So what happens when these things, like when debate isn't fair? Does that mean debate is like over? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think we made a claim about the specific way that like the community would collapse or something, but just that sort of quality of debate, like sort of debate's ability to, sort of the quality of debates across the board becomes degraded, and the activity as such, which relies on a form of equal division of ground, ceases to work, and the job of the negative becomes impossible.
Do you think I, as like a queer person of color in debate, queer black person in debate, have a fair ground against other people? Like, just yes or no?
I mean, I don't think procedural fairness is sort of an argument about. Obviously, there are structural factors that are like service restrictions on access for certain groups of people, but procedural fairness is not. We don't think procedural fairness is especially related to those factors. It's sort of a question of the nature of the game that's not dependent on those things. I.e., those things are qualitatively different than a procedural rule.
Okay, so you mentioned how the Moten app isn't radical, right?
Well, I don't know if we're saying like making an argument about Moten's, the nature of Moten's scholarship or Moten as a person. We're just saying that in the context of debate, it empirically doesn't disrupt logistical flows because policy people like it.
Okay, so what
to the extent it does disrupt logistical flows, our model would too.
So what's Harrison and I's unfair advantage then?
Sorry?
What's Harrison and I's unfair advantage?
You can make the AF about anything that you can make the AF about any literature base and then shift what it says, and we are not prepared to negate whatever the AF may be.
Cool.
All right, I sent out the 1R. It will just be case. Let me know when everyone is good to begin.
I'm good.
Harrison, you good? I assume that's a yes, you're good. No. Okay, cool. And Stefan, do you have it?
Yeah, I'm good.
Alright, awesome. So I was going top down. Top level of the case debate, the 2AC sounds really good at their framing for how the world operates, but the question of the case debate is not did the app correctly identify a problem, but is the app the only or optimal way to solve their impacts? All of our case arguments are net benefits of topicality, and T solves a sufficient amount of the app. Only RT arguments about form, not content, and all their 2AC impact turns is about the ways in which content is bad, which makes their overview not offense for them. Additionally, the 1AC has no advantage statements, so you can vote for any of the case arguments independently. Think about it. They say that the app is good because we think of new ways of speaking, but poetry, different ways of speaking already exist, what means it already happen every day, which means it begs the question, what about the app is unique? What about a ballot does anything to solve any of their offense? They've not explained this, and they have the burden to do so. The 1AR is already too late because all of our negative block offense was based on the 2AC's concessions, which means you should assume that the app is just rethinking words, which means it begs the question, why is that not unique to vote for them? Also, we're impacting their form. That's the framework debate, and extend these academics. The act of just speaking about the process of defense facts being messed up and caught up in the process of logistics is nothing to break down the nodes of power. It just gets locked into academic musings, which reproduces the scholarly capture that most can criticize. Think about it. They say we have to align with all of these groups, and that it's good because it allows for us to chain our ways in which understanding logistics and blocking them, and allows them to use those resistance structures. But what groups do they align with? Who do they help? There's none named in the 2AC, which proves that the project of the 1AC is just stuck and captured within debate, which means they can't solve. And the 1AC's rejection of ameliorative strategies in favor of radical transformation dooms its project to failure intellectual musing. Assignment 11 is supposed to be forsake reforming and radical transformation. Rest of the fragile character of the ideology that translates this may be seen that this system is impregnable, but that it's only illusion. This exposure of hypocrisy and injustice amounts to no more than ideological error. Rests on an unchallenged assumptions about who is benefited, about who is imposed, who costs are imposed as a strategy producing change that leaves much to be desired. No one has provided a good answer to deconstructing free will and rationality is. ABC to suppose that these structures of thought will class what they are shown to be incoherent. It will not to dismantle them, nor is it obvious that their class will produce more community system. Military strategies have their problems, but they consist of real proposals being implemented. Radical deconstruction is only not naive, but also inexclusively solipsistically. If organized or authored no practical programs, they appear utopian as a wealthy white academic. We're making to dismantle the categories, but need to give up the assert claim that doing so promises transformation. They are false and contradicting. No one should suppose that these will solve our problems. They waste and suffering goes unabated. Next, except the read piece of evidence here. It turns the alpha to a form of infra politics, which completes expression of black positionality, the politics of liberation that shuts down forms of everyday resistance that are taking place now. It undermines the energy necessary to organize and solve, rise up to the challenge of the nation state, which is what they have said is necessary to solve their app. Think about how they say they're going to align with anti-fascist groups for the global challenge of imperialism, yet never mention who or what groups they are. Their first argument is that oh, actually, there's that argument. They say that critique of performance is bad. A, it proves all of our arguments on frameworks. If we never get to critique their performance, then what negative ground do we have? It proves that there's no way to negate the affirmative. Second is all this academics proves why their performance alone is not sufficient to actualize the goals in which they've outlined as being necessary to solve any of the harms of the app. Now, the read evidence proper. There's two dissets to their impact of infra-politics. First, it creates a vanguardism dissent. The app becomes the moment of reflection which all black politics is situated in. Value is determined against. They become the say yes no of who is a good or black. Black radicals able to solve basic points or homogenization dissent. They assume that all black radicals have the same ideas of how to engage the world and engage in resource distribution and challenge institutions, etc. Our argument is that your reform of infra politics shuts down those who do not agree with your form of politics and renders them as bad black radicals, which undermines the energy and coalitions necessary to be able to solve only our politics or organizational politics is able to link it from the question of just identity alone and how we can reorganize our institutions in order to have a plurality and multiplicity of different perspectives to be able to solve. And organizing around futurity creates openings for marginalized communities to flourish and prevents extinction. That's Cutner and 7 activists take increased interest in the future, recognize the future despite its intangibilities and impacting the state. The election campaign lifted 45 was premise largely on the fear of futurity demands. 3 demand is the way future is defined through prefiguration. The way the future impacts the present, the way our thoughts are make more life about the future is less more likely. Queerness is a kind of futurity and ideal utopian vision to see beyond everyday restriction. Futurity seems developed by indigenous scholars that look only to hold ongoing erasure only makes it if inhabitants are gone despite the traditional they're not erasing indigenous people from the present and the future. They advance the cause of settler futurity. Indigenous communities are reclaiming the future, opening space for indigenous futurities and flourish and taking steps to process futures outside colonialism. Idle no more standing rock. Indigenous media production. Wall Street traders are gambling our future capitalism foreclosing healthy futures of this planet. Imagining alternative futures is quite literally a matter of life and death, and affect alone is not a basis for politics. Sherman and 15 affect theory humbles rationalists protect attentions by subordinating mind to biochemical process. Thinking is an afterthought that we cannot reliably account for how we've actually been affected by things and others in the world. The Mitsubishi's writing affect operates as a cipher, cannot formulate a comprehensive political judgment and to answer Churchill's spontaneous emergent process remains trapped in a double by no critical judgment is forthcoming so long as the testing can be amplified, cannot coherently critique oppressively political structures such as futurism, Nazism, if the masses embrace such a regime for intensity, mark, add intensity, now extend the and nail evidence, they misidentify how to reorganize rhizomatic expressions of difference, simply attempting to change the meaning of words leaves knowledge unactionable and lost the complex roots of institutions and power that exists as only tiny strategy to concrete political solutions like a plan text is able to create effective mobilizations for resource redistribution and combating violence. Otherwise, their musings collapse into aristocratic thought circles where the ass poetry becomes the end-all be-all of radical politics and continued pathologization of anyone who attempts to politically engage and shuts down current resistance, which they do not have an answer to. Poesis is a vehicle, perhaps, for meaning-making, but it needs to be tied to a form of actionable action, which is the advocacy of things like a political action. I'll answer their Wilder in that here it's wrong. I argue that anti-humanism argues that all social and sociality is denied from black folk, which is simply just not true because kinship structures and radicality exist, which is what the Wilder evidence is about. Now, our model of engagement opens up the process of problematization that is necessary for implementation of micro-political action, which proves that they have the relationship between absent erection and the possibility of political action backwards. You and state's previous phases of research for conservative problem solving, non-investigative relationship to knowledge, power, and ethics of civic organization is making decision by fiat by process of problematization where identify collecting info, creating and sharing appreciation among participants for making sense of field, providing a solution under condition which problems flourish, and reaching new modes of existence through process. The road to bottom up approach facilitated through leadership that is paid through follow working leaders of groups. Market leaders of groups. You all want a marked copy of that speech?
Hey, Liz.
Yes.
Let's go to Discord.
Okay. Stefan, I sent you a couple messages on Discord.
Hi.
Howdy.
Yep.
Yes. So it's going to be case, then framework. Just getting all my things in order, sorry. And we have 441 left as far as prep goes. This will be the first 1AR I've given in over a year, so let's hope this goes well.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. That was a good knuckle crack, by the way. All right. 6 minutes. Everyone ready?
Yep. Good whenever you are.
The grammar of empire shifting into one dominated by logistical capitalism, one that seeks to arbitrarily change and determine the language of the world through silencing and destroying all that are part of its anti-social contract. Through participation and active investment into its logics, treaties and defense facts are formed constantly changing based on their ever-expanding assemblage of localized resistance and crackdown. This capitulates to omnicide, whereby all forms of life are rendered productive based around the logics and the techniques of cattle slavery. Thus, we use poetry as a means to creolize language, as a means to sever our defense pact from the anti-social contract. Poetry as a means to recenter how we understand colonialism and slavery away from the perspective of the white gaze, and instead the perspective of those affected by domination. Opens up space for new subjectivities and understandings of our relationship to the state and logistical capitalism. The argument that's going to be answering all of their pragmatism arguments on the case flow is our Mueller evidence, which first answers the arguments about also answers the arguments about scholarly capture, because it's not necessarily a question of whether or not we spill out of debate, but rather the ways in which we can influence and form subjectivities within debate. That gives us new form strategies that we can use to engage outside of it. We're going to problematize the notion that debate isn't already a part of an institution or isn't itself a part of the anti-social contract. And they also mentioned the fact that we don't mention any examples. However, the Mueller evidence specifically says various different border and environmental struggles that are enabled because of our understanding of assemblage thinking. This also turns all the U evidence about how this understanding of how statecraft operates and using poetry in order to problematize those things and create the opportunities for localized decisions, such as what's going on in this debate, is necessarily good. They also make the vanguardism argument about, however, Stravinsky indicates that poetry can manifest itself in a variety of different forms that isn't gatekeeping. Rather, the poetry is theoretically against the process of gatekeeping because it refuses the static identities put upon us. Put upon us. Next, their argument about how affect isn't a good basis for politics. You shouldn't rely on this because as an alternative, instead promotes an almost biological or scientific understanding of how these things operate, which feed back into the way in which homicide renders all forms of life productive. And their argument about how organizing futurity, this isn't offensive because we don't preclude the opportunity for these. Rather, you can extend our poetry is political argument that rather poetry is a prerequisite to understanding the way the relationship that we have towards these institutions in order so that we can further problematize it. Rather, this debate gives us the opportunity and the skills to be able to do that, which is a reason why you should also be voting for our model of how this operates. On to framework. Framework is debates a way of staticizing language to destroy deviant forms of knowledge and performance within debate. Logistical capitalism and the anti-social contract operate by staticizing one's relationship to it and rendering all forms of actions productive. This means you can filter the framework debate through the lens of the omnicide DI, i.e., their framework argument is an attempt to render the affirmative and all forms of aspects of debate productive. This outweighs this is even shown by their argument, and they make the argument that the fact that voting and hardy have been integrated into some aspects of policy debate as bad. However, that just proves the fact that the affirmative does open up these problems, open up opportunities for new forms of scholarship that are good, i.e., the way in which more people have come to understand what these things are and the way in which they can internalize and not come to a relationship of themselves. Rather, their model of debate forecloses the opportunity to understand and navigate the world as a colonized body through the perspective of not just that of normative policymaking, but one that poetry allows for. This outweighs all of their arguments about procedural fairness. They have yet to actually implicate what an impact to procedural fairness is, i.e., which means there's two. Either we don't get access to any forms of skills or education, or people lose debate, which means we win this debate on either level. Even if people lose debate, and the debate isn't worth saving because it will only produce subjects like Karl Rove or Hillary Clinton or Ben Shapiro that use debate as a means to an end by which to understand and rhetorically dominate other groups of people, or if fairness is good in order to produce and if fairness is, and they haven't actually articulated what type of skills or what type of good things that their model of debate even produces, which means you should default to ours because they lack a defense of these. Rather, there's no impact to fairness, which means the ability in order for colonized bodies to come in and understand themselves in relationship to the anti-social contract and not problematize these ways through poetry and testing these ideas is a reason why the affirmative should be winning. This also answers all of their ballot arguments. They keep demanding that we have that an affirmative ballot necessitates some type of broader spillover. However, this proves our arguments about the way in which they conceive debate as somehow separate from the anti-social contract, i.e., debate is inculcated within this system, and our resistance to it is a form of political action, which is a reason because all the ballot is a referendum on who did the better debating. Rather, what we're saying with our omnicide dissent is the thing that should determine what we think of as the better debating is one that resists that of productivity, because any other normative definition of what the better debating is inculcated situated within the logics of productivity and that which can produce a form of colonial subjectivity. These talk specifically, and this is proved by the fact that they don't see debate as a part of it within some of their line by line arguments. And going onto the TVA, you shouldn't be evaluating it because you can cross apply. You can cross apply the omnicide dissent onto this argument, i.e., this is a form of counterinsurgency, which attempts to take the sort of radical poetic project of the affirmative and turn it into something productive through its use of more normal means, with still triggers because it forces us to view the perspective of political through the lens of the oppressor instead of what our model does, which allows us to engage with the world and the antisocial contract from not the perspective of the white gaze. And this also means they don't get access to any of their ground arguments because they even foreclose their own opportunity to have grounds by kicking cap even before they even got to the framework flow, which means they didn't try to even engage with the affirmative on its own level, which shows how they are involved within this project. Also, you shouldn't give them access to things like the Japanese prolif dissent because they have no explanation of what any of their strategy means, and without a nuanced defense of the way in which we interpret treaties, i.e., the fact that they only see treaties as something that is written down and not a social relationship, as per the Moten and Harney evidence, proves that our pedagogy and the way that we understand treaties is net better than theirs, as you should put that. That's time.
Cool.
Do you want to prep in the Discord?
Yeah.
So it's just like 10 minutes of prep.
Yeah.
Cool.
If you hit on the audio thing above the mute, the arrow on it, and say leave computer audio, you won't hear the Zoom at all. If you're worried about that, by the way.
Liz, did you film my speech?
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. How was it?
It was pretty good. I just sent you a private Zoom message. I was like, that was a great 1AR.
Oh, thank you. Actually, for my first 1AR in a while, that actually wasn't too bad. I just then because I'm used to being a 2A, so I just thought of it as okay. I'm just gonna give it 2AR, but earlier.
Yeah, basically. And it was pretty good. You said all the stuff that was needed to be said, so it leaves it pretty easy for me now. So
yeah, their only option is framework, so just homicide dissent, man.
Yeah.
Could have been, yeah. All right. I'm glad that we now know. I think we definitely, for our 2AC blocks, we need an argument against role-playing.
Yeah.
Just like colonial mimicry or something, that it forces us to understand politics from the perspective of the oppressor, which is antithetical to what the affirmative is talking about, which is what I alluded to in my speech, but we probably should have made 2AC arguments, but we forgot about that, which is fine.
Yeah. I'll just write that in once we're done.
Yeah, it's our first real laugh debate, so it happens.
And I think it's going pretty well for our first half debate. We're not getting beat up. I think we've got some pretty good offense.
We have a somewhat coherent affirmative that does need work, but also I'm glad we had this. I am kind of glad that I had this debate with you so that we could struggle through it together. Where did my pen caps go? You still got a 2AR to give.
Yep. I was just typing that up.
Yeah, I will say they have 10 minutes of prep, so just extend make it a lengthy description of the omnicide dissent and how it turns all of their standards and arguments.
Yeah, I basically this is literally a sentence I wrote, which is this is the violence of omnicide and has been performed by the Meg in every single speech, which is not a lie.
That is a brutal sentence, but very applicable.
Yeah, because kind of true. Every single off case arg that was made was hey,
I just can't get over the fact they didn't even wait till the 1NR to kick out a cap. They just did it straight out of the 2. Yeah. They didn't even. You ever listen to a band called Car Seat Headrest?
Nope.
They're a very angsty band, but they have this one song that's you have no right to be depressed. You haven't tried hard enough to like it. And that's how I feel about this. You have no right to say you have no ground. You didn't even try. You kicked out of the 2NC before framework.
That's so funny because I just saw a tweet that was like, 18-year-old guys be nihilists. Like, bro, did you even try?
You're too young to be a nihilist. You haven't even gotten to college yet, bro. You don't even have anything good to brood over.
Have you even accepted the debt yet?
Yeah.
Like the student loans?
Do you remember that one tweet? The one that's like, actually, no, you have a speech to prepare for. I will tell you this after.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say, like, okay, so this is just gonna be on the side straight up, right?
6 minutes on the side. I'm telling you, it's the best argument. It's so good.
It's really good. I used to run this with my linguistic terror app.
So good.
That was so like frustrating to run because they were like, everybody assumes that because we said terrorism that it was a bad thing. I'm like, no. We're the terrorists.
Terrorism.
That's a good thing.
You're like, no. Terrorism is a good thing. The TSA just buzzing.
Thank God we never said that like in an airport.
What's the big deal with terrorists? It's almost like you think they're bad or something.
I think I have to let Steven back in, but we have finished prep.
I just realized how smart the line "real G's move in silence like lasagna" is. Like, once I type that out, I'm like, wait, that's genius.
That was a good line. Oh, there we go. Cool.
Another classic being, I'm smoking loud, you're smoking libraries.
Cool.
It's like,
All right, Steven, we are ready for that order whenever you are good. Or Stefan, sorry.
It is case, then T. Let me know when everyone's good.
I'm good.
case then T.
Cool. So we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Extend the you, Sherwood, and Dale arguments that have the relationship between the House proetics and possibility of political action backwards only by first starting with the question of how we could create models of problematization structure around specific calls for political action, aka plan text can new political understanding part of the world be put into action. Otherwise, it just means pure intellectual musing that anyone can interpret however they are, which leads to aristocratic takeover and shift to all right fashion because those products resonate more with those in power only having specific plans for institutional state engagement references because it creates gay plus to actively disallow and outline with fascist politics. Instead, the readouts he asked for info politics incorrectly conflates expression of black position on politics and liberation, which turns out solvency because the idea we need new meaning before we take action ignores that black groups individual already living outside the grasp of white neoliberalism, shuts them down as not being enough, which saps the energy necessary to mobilize the project to beyond the base space to improve their intellectually captured, which is not arguments how the app should be productive, how you should develop certain models of skills, but sort of insofar as your ability to have a liberatory understanding without even creating positive politics does not function. Functions better under our model. Procedural T. Procedural fairness is the only impact that matters, since it's the only thing your ballot can remedy. Debate is a game of inches at the half and jump the gun on. Your job as the judges first decide that every sort of race at the same time and then determine who finished the race faster. Yes, there is substantive inequality. It's not neutral to get to the starting line, but there is to minimize through procedural equity, prevent those in structural position of power from leveraging that advantage. Prefer our impact only our impact taking two gas strategy. Competitive merit inevitably matters to people and things like education and practice are not the end all be all, because the strategy always asserts itself means that under their vision of the topic there is an incentive to make something uncontestable, since first and foremost we are both here to win. Even if their evidence says their speech in an academic forum is key, they have completely conceded several tricks that are damning, that prove that they can get all their offense would be resolved under our model. First, they conceded read it and lose, i.e. if their poetry is key to their solvency, they already read it, which they don't have a warrant for on the ballot is key. Second, they conceded read it on the next solves better because it's more radical and actually negates the resolution and sort of explains why it's bad. They do not have a clear counter interpretation, because there's no way for you to evaluate this. The Baudrillard all limits argument impact turns it because it lets them choose to defend literally anything that they want if they do sort of extend it, but it was super blippy, and they should not be able to win this debate unless they have a clear role for the negative, which they do not. The app already has an advantage because of having infinite prep, and anything else structurally shifts the debate because it makes the judges to strategic criteria completely subjective and arbitrary. Top level answering most of their dissents has all of them center on sort of this idea of sort of fluid language being good or static language being inherently oppressive. They've conceded the EP evidence, which is daring creeds and restrictions on personal conduct, including language, are inevitable to literally any form of social organization. They massively conflated necessity of interaction with sort of specific historical algorithmic understanding of the world in a way that their evidence does not. Also, none of their evidence is the constant debate or the resolution anyway, but you do know that they also believe restrictions, speech time, set order speeches, and cross-sex, etc. Priests were at least right in the constant debate. Also, on a thesis level, we've proven even if their delusion understanding is somewhat useful in terms of creating political methods, overemphasizing, destabilizing the meaning of language is bad. Thanks to you and nail work that I did on priests. Even if these arguments are true, sort of restriction is a sliding scale, and there are some forms, there are some restrictions that don't necessarily necessitate things into others, which on this note, I'm going to answer the Mueller evidence here. Debate doesn't affect the out. I'm going to answer the sort of Mueller stuff here. Debate doesn't affect the outside world. First, they've conceded that debate does not affect subjectivity, i.e. no one remembers or researches the content of specific debates after the fact. Second, they conceded that the poetry already solved it because it was already read, which is what I did above. They said there's no impact on procedural fairness. I'm going to be super clear. The impact is the game itself, which is something you endorse by coming here and reading a YC, which is something all of the work I did above. Now, all of this sort of Ben Shapiro, Hillary Clinton, this is not an argument. It's just a list of names of bad people, but there's no explanation of how we lead to that beyond somehow vaguely excluding them, which is a bunch of argument that I did above. But there's no explanation of how uniquely reading a plan makes you uniquely want to sleep or want to join positions of power. Since they dropped that the ballot doesn't change subjectivity, it proves that those people were always going to do bad things. But before they did debate, we also don't mandate you developing a specific mode of skills. We will make case arguments because you also say that the act is a sort of productive political project. But if you don't say that, i.e. if you say that the app is not productive, there's no reason why that's mandated under model. Just proves that the things you say the app does produce are resolved better under our model. They're external benefits, not things that are mandated by our model. Again, the thing about debate being part of the crucially, we're not exclusionary, i.e. we're just one singular form restriction, but we allow poetry, any form of critical scholarship, etc., all of which resolve all of your offense. There is no explanation of how debate is part of the antisocial contract, which is all of the work I demanded. Now, they said that the TVA is counterinsurgency and making them productive. First, you're also productive, which is the work I just did, i.e. you want the judge to vote for you to validate a specific political project. The TVA also is not like a counterplan. It's not mandating you do something. It's just an internal link defense to the fact that your scholarship could be used to defend the topical plan, which is something that you do not have an on-point answer to. That U.S. institution withdraw from NATO. The PAC's purpose is to secure ecocidental energy infrastructure for the West. We don't have to win their results logistical capital in some way. Just that their scholarship grants the justification for a topical plan. Now, the last argument that they made is that kicking the cap case somehow proves that we conceded that we do have ground. But they dropped that this is irrelevant because it's not about the negative's ability to debate. It's about the ability of the judge to effectively decide, which they have not provided a criteria for the judge to do. They also have conceded concessionary ground, i.e. in order to we have to concede sort of some part of the app that you're having that you're sort of we have to concede that you need to like anarchist ethics organization to get access to powers.
Cool, cool. We're gonna go into the Discord.
Yep.
Sounds good. That was a great 2 Stephen. I thought you had really good time allocation. Or sorry, Stefan. I keep saying Steven. I'm so sorry.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeehaw, are we ready for this Fire 2 AR?
Woo!
Yep.
Yeet!
Okay. The order, I think, is gonna be case and framework, but a lot of the stuff is like connected. So I'm just gonna try to signpost as best as I can so everyone is like following me. Okay, let me just get yield timer. Anyone not ready? Nope.
Good whenever you are.
Okay. Right, starting. No. This debate boils down to the violence produced by the statistization of language and rendering all forms of debate and discourse productive. This is the violence of homicide, and it has been performed by the neg in every single speech. Their continuous mischaracterization of our poetry performance is their attempt at making otherized bodies and forms of knowledge intelligible and thus controllable. It is the very type of violence that is produced within the logistic capitalism being perpetuated through the systems of American imperialism and colonialism. That is the exact reason why the U.S. can determine which population needs to be saved from deviant forms of life and which ones should be left to die. This is exactly why Black folks and otherized populations cannot engage in a form of discourse that center these structures. They were never made to include us in the first place. The antisocial contract was signed without us in it. That is why we say that the greatest alliances and treaties were never written into paper, but rather written into the winds. The neg was so caught up in the fact that we're reading poetry that they're not even analyzing what we said in the poem. We're literally saying these things, that these things are implicated within language, and by them seeing language as objective instead of subjective is incredibly violent because it ignores the violence that is embedded into these words and into these unspoken agreements. That is the anti-social contract. Also, this goes back a little bit to the fact that they try to make an alliances. DA. These alliances are made without our consent. We were not included into these alliances, yet we are moved around as pawns because of their logistical control over us. The implication of these words like alliances and defense pacts are always violence in populations that it otherizes. For this reason, it is imperative to disrupt these structures and institutions that uphold and revere these types of discourses. They celebrate those who actively participate in creating the ominous subtle decline of otherized populations and can thus never include us within them. We must refuse the statization of our language to its rendering as productive and nothing but a number to be moved around. Our poetry does this because it recenters the conversation around those who have been directly affected by colonialism in all of its forms. It's like conceded by the neg the entire round and has been said since the 2AC, but they have generated no offense of it and said nothing against it. So it's conceded and therefore true. It is not only it not only allows us to create spaces where we can discuss what our lives look like beyond the periphery of the white neoliberal sphere, but it can also it can also create spaces where we can actually create even though this was in the perm argument, but it still applies to the case stuff. Poesis, where we can actually generate our own types of meaning from what these words mean, how these words have been used against us historically. By claiming that these words are objective, it ignores the historical context of how these things have been used in the first place. We don't claim to solve for everything wrong with the world, but if we have even a risk of creating a space for otherized bodies to be able to theorize and refuse the process of being rendered intelligible and productive, then you must vote F. Them thinking that poetry is our solvency by just reading it is our solvency and that it's already been done is exactly them trying to render us valuable under their colonial structures. And that goes right into the framework debate. Debate is a reflection of the social contract. Debate is the social contract. They get no access to procedural fairness, and we get all of the offense on the omnicide, DA, because debate in and of itself, by forcing us to defend the violent structures of the United States federal government, these alliances, pulling out of certain defense pacts and seeing that as a benign form of colonialism and seeing it as something good is exactly what perpetuates omnicide, because it excludes these bodies from conversation. And they're trying to say that we're productive because we're going for the ballot, but we're just saying that the ballot should be given to the team that does the best debating under our recentering of the discussion. It does not mean that we're trying to be productive in the U.S. periphery. That's the whole point of the app. We're not trying to be productive under the guise of the USFG. The TVA literally cannot exist because once you make a topical version of the affirmative, it then becomes intelligible to the white neoliberal periphery. That is the entire point of the affirmative. It cannot exist in the realm of the USFG. That is exactly why we're creating these new spaces to theorize. The role for the negative is to engage with the theory, which they have not done. Like we said, they read a Cap K argument that they didn't even go for in the 2NC. They dropped it before they even went in the 1NR, which is exactly showing how they just refuse to engage with the theory of the ass. And again, it capitulates in omnicide because they're actively trying to erase this form of discourse that is important in order to refuse the continued colonization of these otherized bodies. If the impact of this framework debate is the preservation of the game, then all we need to do is win that we make the game worth playing. If debate is only the reflection of the antisocial contract, then we have to let it die. That's all it's going to be reproducing. We need to win that we make the game worth playing by recentering these conversations about how these bodies have been affected by colonialism and imperialism. We have to frame this debate on the question that our model of debate is able to produce this type of space where otherized bodies can actually engage in the ways with their subjectivities to the topic. Procedural fairness functionally is not an impact, and framework is a manifestation of omnicide. Omnicide is the biggest impact in this debate, on the case debate and on the framework debate, because they are literally performing these instances of omnicide, and this is supercharged by them saying that that fairness in debate is separate from our positionality in the world, when this is literally a reflection of how we talk about the world. They have not articulated by why the destruction of procedural fairness is a bad thing, and we've been professionally impact turning this. They even briefly mentioned switch side debate, which is inherently violent and another way of trying to render us intelligible. We have been problematizing this debate as the antisocial contract the entire time, so you must vote out, because the biggest impact has been uncontested the entire time, which is omnicide, which results from teams like the NEG being able to render our forms of poetry and our forms of knowledge as unintelligible under the white neoliberal periphery. And this leads into interpersonal internalize the way that these structures function. My AirPod died like midway through that last sentence, so sorry.
All good. Yay, debate! Fire. Fire speeches, fire 2 AR, fire 1 ARs, and Stefan give a fire 2 NR. I'm going to stop this recording and then we can talk about the debate a little bit.